I'm your official Chicago welcoming committee, so I just want to know who brought the weather. What a day out there today. But thanks everybody for joining us this morning. And as mentioned, I'm CEO, co-founder of Cresco Labs. For those of you who don't know, Cresco Labs, one of the larger US MSOs, started publicly trading back in December of last year and based out of Chicago. This is our home state. This is where our headquarters is located. This is where we got our start in the cannabis space. Great to have Benzinga here. Benzinga does great conferences. Always a pleasure to be a part of it. But so for those of you that don't know the history of Cresco, as I mentioned, we started here in Chicago. Back in 2013, Illinois passed what is referred to as the Compassionate Use of Medical Cannabis Act, and it was revolutionary at the time. It really did usher in what's referred to as Generation 2 of cannabis, which is highly regulated, compliance-focused, and it also was one of the first states to do a limited license structure that you had to win them. So for us, and again, for those that don't know the background, this really fit myself and my partners' professional career paths pretty well. We started in we came to cannabis from the banking space, and we gained a lot of experience in what it was like when an industry went from relatively unregulated to really hyper-regulated in a very short period of time. And that's what we started to see develop here with Illinois. With Illinois drafting this law that was really going to take cannabis from relatively unregulated to hyper-regulated, it felt familiar. It felt like something that we knew how to do and was a great pathway for us. I think, this is a room full of investors, and I always look at, the cannabis space and really as any industry. When you're looking for those companies or those entrepreneurs who, have that sort of the timing is right, where stars align, it's not only is it a good opportunity, but it's what is that entrepreneur be able to contribute to the development of the opportunity. And for us, it was understanding regulation, how to stand up compliant companies, and also how to scale them in a very uncertain regulatory environment. So we started Cresco in 2014. And I don't want to spend too much time talking about the organization because I want to talk about Illinois. Illinois has not stopped redefining what cannabis in the cannabis industry looks like. As I mentioned, created Gen 2 of medical. I think Illinois this last year has gone ahead and created Gen 2 of adult use also. So I'm going to jump around a little bit here with these slides. Before we get into that, I want to show you what Cresco looks like in Illinois. So as I mentioned, this is our home state. This is where we got our start. The first foray into the cannabis space for us, it was important to be on the production side of it. At a very simple, objective view of this, there were two types of operators or licenses in Illinois. You could either be the cultivator and the manufacturer, or you could be the retail dispensary. For us, in our approach to the space and how we felt that we could most impact the industry and how we could normalize and professionalize cannabis, for us it was really important to be on the cultivation side. So we applied for cultivation licenses. We were fortunate to win 3 of the 21 that were issued. And then subsequently, though, we do love the idea of vertical integration. I think especially when you're dealing with a highly regulated industry that has a certain amount of risk associated with it and trust that has to be built, right, through the normalization process. For us, that seed to true sale was an important role for us to play. So we acquired 5 dispensaries in the state. So our total footprint in Illinois as it exists right now is 3 of the 21 cultivation centers and 5 of the 55 dispensaries that are open. We're going to go through the sort of the developments and the maturation of the Illinois industry. There's some changes that come with adult use compared to the medical program, but this is what our footprint looks like in the state. 3 of the cultivation licenses and 5 of the 55 dispensaries. So a little bit of the history on Illinois here. As I mentioned, revolutionized medical cannabis. And then as we've progressed through, that's going to be difficult for me to see there. So that was in 2013. We were awarded licenses beginning of 15. Adult use, it's important to know, it didn't happen overnight. Adult use doesn't happen overnight, right? This is legislation that had been socialized down in the Capitol for 2 legislative sessions before this year. So it was a very, I think, strategic and smart decision on behalf of the sponsors of this effort to make sure that conversation was happening in the Capitol for several legislative sessions before there was a real push for it. Another thing that was very important for the adult use law that eventually gets passed here in Illinois was having a best-in-class medical program. And we'll get into that in a little bit and sort of how you make this transition from a highly regulated medical program to a really professional and well-developed adult use law. But then earlier this year, as I'm sure everybody's aware, we were successful in becoming really the first state in the country to pass an adult use law and program through the legislative process. A lot of people don't realize the first 10 states to do it did it with ballot initiatives and voter referendums. It's a different animal when you're talking about getting all of the stakeholders to sit at the table and be able to pass a piece of legislation through the legislature. So a couple of key parts of the program here. As I mentioned, first state to really pass a regulated adult use program through the legislature. It has state-funded financial aid and career development as part of the piece of legislation. Now, it's important to understand, this is a social equity first, tax and regulate second adult use law, which is truly, it's fundamental to the way that this law got passed. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I see for the future of this industry in other states and how they're going to have adult use laws and what those will look like. I think this is, again, a model that you're going to see, just like on the medical side, on the adult use side, you're going to see other states learn from this. Because as I mentioned, it's incredibly difficult to pass a piece of legislation that is this, I don't want to say controversial, but it has as many people sitting at the table, these stakeholders, that have, I would say at this point, it's less of an issue of yes or no. It's more of an issue of everybody is yes, but this is how we want it. And you have to figure out how you're going to accommodate the vast majority of those needs in order to get it across the finish line. And then again, a great percentage of sales tax revenue that gets allocated to revitalizing communities that have been disparately impacted by the war on drugs. Really important part. Let's skip over it here with seed. So, actually, take that back. Sorry, guys. Slides out of order here. The future of adult use. Oh, Tim, you snake bit me, buddy. There we go. Sorry, I should have shut my phone off too. The adult use law here, one of the most important things to understand is where Illinois is sort of setting this model for other states. I firmly believe that there will not be another adult use law passed in the U.S. that doesn't have a social equity component to it. As we stop talking about epilepsy and cancer as what qualifies a consumer to participate in your cannabis program in your state, and you just start talking about over the age of 21, you can't have that conversation without addressing the social equity issues that are associated with it. When you have somebody who was just arrested for doing something the day before, and now you have the ability for a very select few licensed companies to be able to actually participate in a legal program, you have to bridge that gap, and it's not easy. It is going to be a component of how these laws get passed going forward, because it's a material component of why a state would want to do this. And again, definitely, if you're talking about how you either get a ballot initiative passed or how you get something through the legislature, those are stakeholders that are absolutely sitting at the table, people that have a very direct and sincere focus on making sure that this is done the right way and that it includes the communities that have been most negatively impacted by the prior war on drugs, get a seat at the table and get to participate in the development of this new and exciting regulated version and legal version of a cannabis program. So again, speaking with a room of investors, and I think you're all here today to sort of learn perspectives and get feedback from various members of the industry. I think the one of the roles that I could play here is, from my perspective, I tell you, I don't think another adult use law gets passed in the U.S. that doesn't have a social equity focus. So if I'm an investor and I'm sitting in your seats, I look at the organizations, if I'm contemplating an investment in them, and I truly wouldn't invest $1 in an organization that doesn't have a social equity plan. If they're planning or sort of anticipating or projecting that they're going to be a player in this space and that they're going to participate in states that have a focus on or potential to develop into an adult use law, they either, I'd see two issues with companies that don't have a social equity approach or plan. Either they're not seeing that this is where the industry is heading, and that's a giant blind spot from my perspective. I think that's a giant blind spot, or two, they do see it and they're not putting the things in place to actually participate and to make the programs better. Either one of those scenarios I don't think is a very good scenario to be in as an organization or as a leader of an organization. So I think it's really important, again, from my perspective, the future of cannabis and the development of cannabis laws, both at a state level and at a federal level, are going to have a component of social equity, fairness, restorative justice as a part of them, as they should. And investable companies recognize that and are doing things proactively to be a part of that solution, not just a participant in the industry. So, with that, a little bit of the things that Cresco Labs has done to approach this. Cresco, and I think I could speak, I usually try only to speak for myself, but I think it is fair to acknowledge my peers that are similar in design and in structure and in historic path as Cresco, which is companies that have won some very competitive licenses in highly regulated markets through merit-based application processes. And the way that you're successful in those projects and in those application processes is that you need to develop a very robust, very comprehensive community project. That's basically what Cresco Labs has been from the very beginning, is we build these wonderful community projects with the communities that we're located in. If a state tells you that there's 10 criteria that they want you to convey to them as to why you should earn a license, we always thought that there's 10 more things that they want to see that are sort of in the shadow. And of course, I think that starts with, they want to know that you're going to be welcomed in the community that you're in. The last thing they want to do is give a license to somebody who then results in a bunch of lawsuits from your neighbors that say, I don't want you in my backyard. So building these wonderful community-based projects with support from your lot line neighbor, from your mayor, from the county executive, from the chief of police, from the school board, in the community that you're in, that you've developed community give back programs, that you have developed workforce development programs, that you have internship programs that you establish with local community colleges, et cetera. Those are the things that we and our peer set have developed from day one. Now, as you're transitioning into a state that might have adult use where, again, social equity comes into play a lot more, because now it's not epilepsy anymore, it's over the age of 21. For us, it's a very simple sort of adaptation to say, well, okay, now we look at these communities, we're in a much broader community, we're in the community of Illinois, and we've got communities, specifically in Chicago in particular, that have been significantly disparately impacted by the war on drugs, and you incorporate that into your planning on how you're going to be a good member of the communities that you operate in. So earlier this year, we formalized our community-based approach as SEED, and it's Social Equity and Educational Development Plan. And there's three main buckets that we focus on with the SEED program. Social equity, of course, is the red thread that runs through all of these. But when you're talking about restorative justice, right? When you're talking about now changing, not only changing the future, but you've got to reach back and you've got to fix some of the wrongs that are associated with these prior issues with the application of drug laws. There's a lot of members of our community that are, not only them personally, but the aftermath of what happens after they paid their time, the sort of continued impact on their lives associated with that record. So expungement fairs are a big part of what we do. And making sure that now that this is no longer going to be illegal in that same sense, that they don't have to carry that baggage with them going forward. One of the things that we're doing, of course, with education and workforce development is a reincorporation of people that have drug-related offenses on their records to now again participate in a program that has an unbelievable ability to positively impact these communities that have been negatively impacted historically. So that's a big part of what we're doing with SEED, and also community impact and incubation. So as Illinois has developed this law here, the future licenses under the adult use program that are going to be issued on both sides, cultivation, manufacturing, and also on the retail side, they have a social equity component. There's an encouragement, right? There's a component of the scoring process that is going to specifically address members of communities that have been most negatively impacted and people that have records associated with the war on drugs. So making sure that we assist in those the communities and also the potential candidates to apply for those licenses, that we act as not only an education source and teach them what the application process is like, what this industry is like, provide them with paid, in anticipation of applications, with job opportunities in our facilities to learn how the industry works from the inside out. Provide them with assistance in the application writing process, and then also with seed capital in the event that they're successful in the application process, and a long-term relationship that they can have with us to help ensure the likelihood of success. These are the types of things that Cresco is doing, not only, again, with the direct impact of the potential applicants who might be licensees in the future, but it's also incorporating the rest of the community. And again, this is something that as investors you should want to see, because I know that you're not only interested in investing in plant-touching operators, you're looking at other organizations and other business models that are in this industry too. And we do the same. We broaden our view of who's a member and who's a participant of this industry with us, and that includes our third-party service providers. So as we move forward with our expungement fairs and these other ancillary services, that the efforts that we want to provide, and in furthering the community outreach of this industry, we require that our third-party service providers do too. And it's one of those things. We work with a group of law firms across the country. One of the things that we require is that they contribute pro bono hours. And as we're working with incubated potential applicants here, legal services are provided to them for free. When we do expungement fairs, they provide attorneys and legal resources to be at the expungement fairs and help shepherd applicants through those processes. And it's something that successful organizations have the ability to require their partner organizations to contribute. The great thing is, I can tell you that not one of our, I shouldn't even say it like that, every single one of our third-party service providers that we've asked to assist in these programs have been happy to do so. So again, it's part of the overall industry that's being developed here. And again, as a room full of investors, I think that's what you should be looking for in organizations that you look to invest in. So with that, I think I'm now counting up also on my time. Again, welcome to Chicago, everybody, and I hope you have a wonderful conference here.